If you're like me and you were on the internet in your formative years around 2010, then you're probably aware of a milieu of people that existed around the time that was very popular. They called themselves the skeptics, or atheists, or rationalists, whatever flimsy label they had at the time. They watched shows like Penn and Teller's Bullshit or Bill Maher. They were vaguely liberal or libertarian and always put themselves on the side of the truth. As someone who comes from this background myself, I've always wondered why there was such a divergence in the political trajectories of these people and myself. People who like to think of themselves as scientifically minded materialists are today defending the preposterous idea that a biological male can become a female. They have such a cult-like groupthink mentality that Ryan Falk's term for them, atheist cult, is very illustrative. A lot of the intellectual impulses that these people had are actually pretty casually sound. You don't always know what's true, and you can be wrong, so it's good to be skeptical and to ask questions and constantly update your beliefs based on new evidence. Consensus isn't always consubstantial with the truth, so you should be a free thinker and try to figure things out by yourself as an individual, disregarding what's popular or orthodox. If the majority is wrong about something, then it's good to be a heretic or a rebel and to stick to the truth, whatever it is. Science is a very solid way of gaining information about the world, so we should, as much as possible, rely on scientific inquiry and empirical data to determine what's real and what's true over idealistic speculation. If there's a conflict between your values and science, then that means you shouldn't reject the science, but rather reconsider your values to better fit the available data. The whole point was to be a critical thinker. All of this was implicit and explicit in the skeptical movement. But of course, a lot of these people who call themselves skeptics didn't really care about any of those values. Today, so-called scientific free thinkers are denying the biological reality of race, pretending the world is flat, defending fundamentalist Islam, relying on insubstantial egalitarian visions of the world, and accepting the postmodern system of subjective truth and identity uncritically. Back in the day, these skeptics thought it was completely insane that a person could be put in jail for owning a book or having a certain belief. They emphasized the importance of free speech and free inquiry. They saw speech totalitarianism as an example of human ignorance and malice, citing books like Fahrenheit 451 or 1984. But today on the internet, you find that these people are acquiescing to concepts like hate speech, which is basically 1984's thought crime. In the UK, if you own quote-unquote hateful materials, you can be jailed for up to 5 years. Recently, a man named San Melia was sentenced for putting up stickers raising awareness of replacement migration. This is a literal thought crime. But you won't see any of the free speech skeptics coming out in defense of him. What is basically formed out of the skeptic community is a cult-like structure of leftist groupthink. They will ignore their belief in free speech when they see an opportunity to strike a blow against their enemy, the far right. If you look at the trajectory of these people's internet careers, they've mostly fallen off. I think there are a few reasons for that. In the first place, the old religious conflicts basically don't exist anymore. The idea that religion is the cause of all wars and human oppression is untenable because in our modern secular age, there is at least as much war as there always has been over land claims and access to resources. The old Catholic system of controlling access to knowledge is today accomplished through the media and the public education system, or what Ryan calls the meta cult. Religion was never a necessary factor for authoritarianism and enforced societal ignorance. It was just the prevailing morality at the time. Now that religious morality has been replaced with secular morality, secular reasons are put up for justifying this encroachment into civil liberties. Instead of eradicating heresy and protecting the church, we have to protect democracy or stamp out hate. The same old dynamics of political oppression are being carried out under a different banner. Thus, the atheist invective against religion as the most hateful and oppressive force in the world just ends up falling flat. It doesn't describe reality anymore, if it ever did. Those who are looking for an explanation of the modern world, therefore, just don't find the atheist canards interesting anymore. When the creationists were evangelicals, rather than mainstream leftist academics and people like Franz Boas, it was fun to join the skeptics in pointing and laughing at their denial of human evolution. But today, the people who deny human evolution are the anti-racists who believe evolution stopped at the neck and never can affect mental traits. And now that the creationism has an atheistic flavor, the atheists have stopped caring about pushing back. It becomes quite clear to everyone looking on that the skeptics never held to their values. They were just ego identifying with skepticism to appear smart and up to date. That's a big reason why no one wants to watch them anymore. They're frauds. The other reason they've fallen off is because of political polarization. Skeptical liberals basically do not exist anymore. Those who used to be in that milieu are now either far right or far left. Either they think she-nesses are real, or they've become scientific racists. Again, this has a lot to do with group psychology and group conflict dynamics. Sitting on the fence and calling yourself a free thinker just isn't possible anymore. You have to pick a side. You have to pick a position of absolute truth. The skeptics were always concerned about staying at the top of the hierarchy, appearing smart, and having the majority on their side. Today, if you want to be successful, you have to be a leftist because they won the political conflict. But these people aren't all that well schooled in leftist thought, so they've been superseded by people with a better grasp on Marxism, like Vaush or Hassan Piker, who are far better grifters in that area. But what interests me is the reason why I came out of that era differently than they did. I accepted all the skeptical values. You should follow the truth wherever it takes you. Science is a good way of understanding the world and reality. The majority isn't always right, and so you should be a critical thinker, open to changing your mind. What happened to me was that I became aware of data on race and sex differences and saw that it was undeniable that human heredity is a major force that shapes society and the world. I watched Jared Taylor, and even if I didn't want to accept his views at the time, I knew that what he was saying had a strong basis in science. He wasn't just some kook weaving just so stories about human behavior, like, say, Jared Diamond. I saw studies on intelligence showing that the variation in human intelligence is mostly down to heredity. I saw many disproofs of the liberal view of human equality. Even my own lived experience has proven that human inequality is an objective fact. By being skeptical, free-thinking, and open-minded, I gradually became more right-wing and reactionary. And I think the reason for that is because I didn't put my ideological cart before the horse. If you're really invested in believing that the earth is flat, and if your whole identity revolves around the earth being flat, you'll just end up denying any contrary evidence. There's great proof of this in the fact that some of these skeptical people ended up criticizing Richard Dawkins for his comments about race, and also chastised Sam Harris for believing in disparate evolution in humans. Atheist cult really hasn't changed. They still have the same cult-like mentality. That's what was different between them and I. I didn't believe things because I believed I was on the right side of history. I believed them because I thought they were true. If your belief in objective truth is dependent on the feeling of having a million other people surrounding you with the same consensus belief, you really don't value truth as much as you value group belonging. These skeptics were never prepared to enter the intellectual arena, and because of that, they simply couldn't stay relevant. When the group evolved and left them behind, they couldn't manage to come back. They had nothing to offer people because what they had really was never theirs to begin with. All they had was a dialectic. Religious people are dumb. Atheist science people are smart because they believe in science. Conservative people are backwards and have an invisible sky daddy, while liberals were smart and open-minded. Turns out that dialectics shift, and if you can't shift with them, then you're going to be eating dust. Today, liberals are closed-minded, cultic people whose thinking is strictly connected with social consensus and social status. Their religion is global universalism. If you can't realize that, if you really are a skeptical and free-thinking heretic, that the new Catholic Church has become egalitarian liberalism, and that if you support the truth of human evolution, you're now friends with the right, you're just delusional or dishonest. These guys chose tribal belonging and fellowship over the truth, and they blithely claim that it's the right who are fear-mongering, sheep-like tribalists. That's why I think ultimately the skeptics have disappeared. The honest ones are now right-wing. The dishonest and ignorant ones got left behind by their friends. TJ Kirk is now just a laughingstock because everyone associates him with the banana incident. No one ever really thought that the amazing atheist was smart. They just thought he was on the right side. Well, the sides have changed. You're no longer on the right side. You're on the side of Google, Wall Street, Bill Gates, and George Soros. You're on the side of people who formally deny human evolution when the science butts up against their subjective beliefs. You're on the side of people who think pseudoscience like gender affirmation is valid and correct. That's why no one cares. You put all your money on black and it rolled a red. The smart guys never gambled because they knew the game was rigged from the start. Maybe another reason why the skeptics have acquiesced to leftist values is simply because the logical end of skepticism is actually total skepticism of everything. In postmodernism, the default position is total skepticism of truth. The position of scientific realism just isn't feasible anymore. It doesn't have popular adherents in academia. Science is just one way of knowing the world to be subsumed by other indigenous ways of knowing or whatever that are equally valid. The skeptics, if they really insist on being totally skeptical, have to be skeptical of everything that they hold to be true. And maybe that's a big reason why they have started believing in she-nesses, which is skepticism of sex and gender. It turns out that skepticism itself isn't really worth all that much when taken absolutely. It actually just ends up making knowledge impossible. A smart man is only as skeptical as he needs to be, but an idiot is always bewildered, always questioning everything and incapable of determining what's right and what's true. If your whole shtick is being on the side of truth, as was true for the skeptics, then what good is this total skepticism? At what point do you stop and say there has to be limits? There has to be something absolute that grounds truth, or at least a limit to your own skepticism. The crisis of the skeptic community is the same crisis that has affected society after the death of God. Without a sense of the absolute, then we can never be sure that what we're looking at isn't just some sort of solipsistic hallucination. Without the absolute, then everything is relative. If everything is relative, there's no objective truth. If there's no objective truth, then who can even be on the right side of history? Who can be on the side of the truth? This is the tragedy of atheist cult. They are doomed to epistemic death, unwilling to admit that their position of hardline atheism was their undoing. They are the scions of centuries of Christian development of the sciences, and they poo-poo all of Christian thought, even though it is the very foundation of scientific realism. Scientific realism cannot self-justify. There's the problem of hard empiricism and the problem of skepticism, as well as the problem of induction. Your only options in that case are to either ignore the problems and hope they'll go away, which they won't since the postmodernists will come in to remind you of them, or just give up on the notion of realism altogether and assert that science is just your preference, like your favorite flavor of ice cream. In that case, you can't be on the right side of anything. You don't care about the truth, and ultimately, there's no right superior to that of the truth. And so here we are. The skeptics are no more. They have skeptic themselves out of existence. They are laughable buffoons who can't even tell you what direction is up. They didn't foresee the problem, so now they hold tightly onto their science for comfort while it slowly gets pummeled by academics and then thrown down the drain. They don't care that free speech is going down the toilet because they no longer have any absolute values. All of their values are now relative. It's good when the bad guys lose and bad when the good guys lose. They've lost all sense of being rebellious or heretical. They are now slaves to authority in both knowledge and action. This is how they will be remembered.